Hi, and welcome to Crafts with Ash DIY and Decor. My name's Ashley, and today I put together an amazing video of some Valentine's DIYs that I actually made last year. But last year at this time, my page was itty bitty and really nobody saw those DIYs. So I thought I'd share them with you today. First, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, click that notification bell so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Then, click the drop-down menu and click all so you're notified about all notifications. I upload videos every Wednesday and Friday, so I know that there's a ton of content you're not going to want to miss. If you're in for home decor ideas, decorate with me's, room makeovers, and updates in your home, this is the channel for you. All right, let's get started with these 14 Valentine's DIYs. For this first DIY, I'm going to start off with this greeting card from the Dollar Tree and this little frame that also came from the Dollar Tree. And this project was so easy. All I did was unwrap the frame from the plastic that is protecting it, and I purposely got the gold frame because last year I was really into the red, the pink, and the gold theme, so I thought that this glitter gold frame was gorgeous. So now I'm just going to remove the backing and remove the paper that came in the frame. Now I'm going to hot glue the glass into the frame so that way it doesn't move and it doesn't fall out, because we're actually not going to be putting the back on. You can actually take those little black tabs off too if you want. So then the last step is to just flip it over, and we're going to take the cup part off of that card and we're going to hot glue it to the front of the frame on the glass. That was it. That was how easy it was to create this little love you a latte sign. Now, I did want this to stand, so I did decide to add some tumbling tower blocks to the back of it, and then I painted the blocks black. That way it would stand on its own. But I thought that this was so cute, so easy, so high-end looking, and the perfect addition to my Valentine's coffee bar last year, and I'm most likely going to use it on my coffee bar this year. Real quick, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for choosing to stop by today. I really hope you love what you see. And hey, stick around with me for a while by subscribing to my channel. If you're returning, you already know I love you and appreciate you so much. And thank you to everybody. I just hit 16,000 subscribers this past week, and I could not be more over the moon and more appreciative to all of you. So thank you so much. So after my tumbling tower blocks were dry, that completed this first DIY. It's so cute. But what do you think? All I got was this frame from the Dollar Tree, and it has a little bit of confetti in it and says dream. Now I purposely got the gold frame because I'm loving the golds and reds and golds and pinks this year for Valentine's Day, but you can get whatever you'd like. Then I also picked up a pack of this heart confetti from the Dollar Tree too. The first thing I did was take off the back and dump all of the confetti off to the side. Then I had to take off the word. Now this actually came off pretty easy. All I did was use some 100% acetone nail polish remover and a cotton ball, and then I used a scraper for the stubborn parts. Now you want to make sure that your glass is clean, so be sure to wipe it down. Next, I took the backing that came on the frame and I had to take out their little nails that were in there. So I just used my wire cutters to do that. And then I took some scrapbook paper that I picked up from Hobby Lobby for 25 cents and I traced the back of the frame onto that, then cut it out. Then by using Mod Podge, I glued that scrapbook paper onto the back of that frame. After making sure all my corners were down, I took my sanding block and I sanded down the excess paper that was hanging off. Now you do want to make sure to sand in the down direction, that way it gets a nice clean edge. Next, I took that frame and that confetti and I poured some of the confetti into the frame. Now, I kind of just judged it to see how much I wanted to put in there, but I did put in about half the bag. Then I went ahead and replaced the back of the frame once I had enough confetti that I liked. To make sure that my back of the frame stayed on, I did go ahead and hot glue that down. Next, I picked up this sign from the Dollar Tree that has all these hearts, and I took the one that had the pink outer heart and the white polka dots and the red glitter, and I hot glued that to the middle of my frame. To complete this project, all I did was took these sticker letters that I got from the Dollar Tree, and it came with a ton of letters, and I spelled out the words "Be Mine" right in the middle of that heart. To seal my stickers, I went ahead and put some Mod Podge all over the heart. I think this little standing sign came out so adorable. I love all the colors put together. They are just so cute. What do you think? This next DIY is super easy as well. I picked up this little camera sign from the Dollar Tree, and I really loved the pale pink on it, but I did not want all the natural wood because I wanted this to look a little bit more Valentine's Day. So all I'm going to do is take my apple barrel red paint, and I'm just going to paint any part that is that natural wood color. Now, I did decide to paint the edges of this little camera too. After my red paint was dry, I'm going to take my Apple Barrel Pink Parfait and I'm just going to paint in the white spots that were there before. So it's like a little flash button or like the take the picture button. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my white paint as well just to repaint in those spots. Now I could kind of see underneath the red paint, so I just used that to trace over it and then go ahead and fill them in. Now to make my sign look a little bit more rustic, I did take my sanding block and I sanded all the way around the edges, and this gave a really cool effect because it brought up that natural wood from underneath that was there originally. So I just sanded all around the edges and a little bit on the inside of my camera as well. Once that was done, I took these letters that I got from the Dollar Tree and I just spelled out "We Just Click." I do remember that this was inspired by a greeting card that I saw last year at the Dollar Tree. It was a picture of a camera and it said, "We just click." And when I saw this camera, I knew that's what I wanted to make. So to protect my stickers so they wouldn't come up, I went ahead and put some Mod Podge over the entire camera. And then to dull down the black letters, I did actually take a little bit of white paint and just kind of lightly brush over it. That way it just kind of made it look a little bit more rustic and old looking. And then I did take that sanding block again and sanded over the letters as well, just so it wouldn't look as black. And then I did feel like this just needed something else, just a little bit more detail. So I took a really small detail brush, dipped it in some white paint, and at the bottom and the top I added some stitching marks. And that was it. That completed this super cute camera DIY for Valentine's Day. What do you think?
More than you think about it. If I could, I would be the perfect deja vu.
For this last DIY, all I used was this piggy bank. It was 3D piggy bank from the Dollar Tree. It says invest in yourself. And I removed the back of the bank. Now it did come off easy because obviously it would come off easy because that's how you get your money out. And then I took a scraper to take off the letters. At first I tried using that acetone again, but it didn't work. But the scraper worked really well. You got to put a little elbow grease into it, but eventually all the letters did come off. Make sure to clean out the inside of that frame really well so you don't have any remnants of the letters. Then I took the back of that frame and again using that same chevron pink scrapbook paper, I traced out the little house part, which was the back. Then I cut it out. Now, at first I tried to remove that paper that came on that backing, but it didn't come off, so I just decided to put my scrapbook paper on the top of that. Now, rather than Mod Podge it, I chose to hot glue it on there because I thought that it would give it a stronger hold. So after I had it all measured down, that's what I did, and then I pushed it down really hard so it didn't come off. Took a bag of the heart gemstones that you see here and just poured them right into that box. Now I did save one, the one that you're seeing I didn't miss completely because I thought I was going to use it on a different DIY and then I didn't, or haven't yet, I might, but I did pour the whole bag in there. And then I took one of the color your own heart ornaments that came in a pack of 8 from the Dollar Tree, and I painted one of the sides white in my Waverly chalk paint. Now I did decide halfway through to cover the hole, so all I did was put a little hot glue in the hole, waited for it to dry a little bit, and then scraped it off and painted over it. It worked out really great. Now I did forget to mention that I did put the back on the frame. The next thing I did was after my heart was completely dry, I took a makeup sponge and dipped it in some black acrylic paint, just the tiniest bit. And then I rubbed my makeup sponge around the edges and a little bit inside the frame just to give it a little bit of distressing. Next, I took those sticker letters again and I put the words "Love lives here" right in the middle of my heart. Now, I did run out of E's, so I just used 2 F's for those in the word "here." So if you see me cutting up some stuff, that's what I'm doing. Once I had my letters down and I thought it looked good, before I Mod Podged it, I decided to take my white brush and just dry brush over the letters just a little bit to mute the black lettering. Then I took my Mod Podge and sealed them down. I then decided that it needed just a little bit more distressing, so I took my makeup sponge again that had the black acrylic paint on it, and I brushed the black acrylic paint over my heart just to make it a little bit darker. After my heart was finished, I went ahead and hot glued it to the middle of my frame. To finish off this piece, I took a piece of ribbon that I actually got from Michael's, and I tied just a simple shoelace bow and hot glued it right to the top of my house. I think this DIY came out so pretty. I love the message behind it. Just love lives in a home with your family, and it's all about love, right? So, what do you think? First DIY, you're going to need this Valentine sign with the 2 plaques on it and the metal hearts, and then this pack of burlap bags. The first thing I did was take off the hangers from the sign, and I'm only going to use one of the planks from the sign. Then I went ahead and sanded down any rough parts. The staples did leave a little bit of a hole, so I just sanded it down. Next, I painted my plaque with Waverly chalk paint in white. Now, I didn't really go for full coverage here. I just wanted to get the majority of it, but I was okay if some of the original brown was showing through. After my board dried, I took that other board and I just used it as a straight edge, and I just drew lines going across to make it look like shiplap. I'm not really measuring out my lines, I just kind of eyeballed it and went from there. Then I took my finger and I rubbed across the lines to kind of rub it in and to make it a little bit more mute. Next, to give it that rustic effect, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and a makeup sponge, and I dipped my sponge into the lid, dabbed some of it off on a plate, and then gently rubbed around the edges and the corners of my plaque. Now, I did, like I say, pay attention to the corners and the edges mostly, and then I went ahead and went into the middle. I turned my makeup sponge on its side and I went ahead and defined the lines that I had drawn on there. Next, I took my sanding sponge and I went ahead and sanded it down just a little bit to blend all my paints. Next, I took 2 of those burlap bags and I cut around the shape of the heart. Now, I did leave a little bit of the burlap around the red because I thought that it would be a little bit more rustic, and I made sure to cut out 2 of them, which actually equaled 4. Next, I took that same makeup sponge that had the Waverly Antique Wax on it, and I just lightly brushed around the edges of each of the hearts. Then I took my hearts and arranged them on the board how I liked it. I went red, natural, and I did overlap them too. After I laid them out, I went ahead and hot glued them all down. Next, I took these black block letters that I got from the Dollar Tree, and they're stickers, and I pulled out LOVE and put one letter on each heart. Then, to seal my letters, I took some Mod Podge and I brushed that all over every heart. Next, I took my twine and starting from the back, I hot glued a little bit of it down on the end, and then I wrapped it around and around and around on each of my sides. It wasn't until this moment that I realized that those silver hearts were still on the back of my sign, so I just went ahead and plucked them right off. Now, don't get rid of stuff like this because you can always use them in other DIYs. In fact, I used one in my tiered tray DIY. I'll go ahead and link it at the end of this video. Finally, to make a hanger for my sign, I took some of this nautical rope and I cut a little piece off and hot glued it to my sign on the back. To make sure both ends of my nautical rope stayed down, I went ahead and cut off a little piece of the brown paper that I'm working on top of, and I put that down on each end just to give it a little bit more support. I think this little sign is the perfect addition to any rustic Valentine's home decor, and you don't even have to put a hanger on. It would be great to lean on a shelf, or you can display it on a table. Well, what do you think? For this next DIY, I used this glass candle holder plate, a candle holder stick, and I grabbed a necklace out of the 3-pack of heart necklaces from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I did was remove all the tags, then I gave each of these a few coats of Waverly chalk paint in white. After my pieces were completely dry, I went ahead and took a bottle of paint to prop up my plate, and then I simply hot glued the necklace around the rim of that plate. Then I took that candle holder stick and I hot glued it to the middle of the plate on the back. Now you should probably use E6000. I just didn't have any with me, and for video purposes I used hot glue, but I have to say it's held up pretty well. Finally, to add a little touch to the bottom, I did the same thing and I took that necklace and hot glued it around the bottom rim. Now, I wouldn't say this piece is completely rustic, but I really loved it after I made it and I had to find somewhere to put it, so to be quite honest, this is the video it landed in. But to make it rustic, you can always wipe some Waverly antique wax on it, you can sand it so the glass comes through, but still, I think this made for a perfect little display piece. What do you think? For my next DIY, you're going to need this little shadow box that I got from the Dollar Tree. I purposely picked this one because of the hearts around the sides. Now, when I saw this, I immediately thought it looked like an envelope, maybe from a Valentine. Now, I didn't know this, but I saw that Crafts by Caitlin also did something like this. Ours look a little bit different, but props to her. Great minds think alike, I guess. The first thing I did was pop off that heart that was on top and then give the front of this box a coat of Waverly white chalk paint. Next, I took that heart and I painted it in Waverly white chalk paint too, and then after that dried, I painted it in Pink Parfait from Apple Barrel. Next, to make this look a little bit more rustic, I took my sanding sponge and I sanded the edges of my box. To remove some of the paint that got inside those little slats, I took a little knife and a craft stick and just kind of pushed it back and forth just to open them up. After my box was sanded down, I went ahead and took that heart and did the same thing. Now I really paid attention to the edges because you can see as I keep sanding, the white is coming through. Next, I took these little red letters that I got from the Dollar Tree, and these are stickers, and I spelled out SWAC. Remember that? Sealed with a kiss. Once all my letters were down, I kind of decided it was a little too dark, like too red. So I took that same sponge brush that my white Waverly chalk paint was on, and I just lightly coated over the letters. Then I wiped it out, sanded it down. I really was just trying to mute it a lot. Next, I went ahead and hot glued it to the top of that box. Now you want to make sure to hot glue the heart in the right direction, because at first I didn't, but if you look at the sides, the hearts are going down from your view, and so I had to turn it. So just make sure you hot glue it in the right direction. As I was looking at it, I just still did not like the red, so I ended up taking my white paint marker and I just traced over each of the letters, and this helped so much. I feel like that really added to the look that I was going for. What do you think? For this next DIY, I used this banner that I found in the party section at the Dollar Tree, and then this 12-pack of red felt hearts. I went ahead and took the banner out of the package and I lined them all up. There are 5 different banners. Then I took the felt hearts and I hot glued one of the felt hearts on each of the banner pieces. Next, I took these foam picks that spell out love that I got out of a package, and they also had 2 hearts that I am going to be using as well. And I hot glued each of the letters on each of the banner pieces. And then those little hearts, I also glued down each of the banner pieces as well. Now, I had every intention of making this sign a little bit more rustic, but as I was doing it, I just really loved it how it was. I just didn't want to take away from the pretty colors, and if you know me, you know that I love the reds and the pinks of Valentine's Day, so I was okay with how this came out. So I guess you could say this one isn't really rustic either, but I still really wanted to share it. After all of my pieces were glued down, I went ahead and took that baker's twine that came with that banner sign, and I put a little hot glue on the end and twisted it with my fingers. That way it was easier to loop through. Then I went ahead and started looping my banner pieces through. Now, I actually decided right on the spot that I was going to add some beads. So I took these wooden beads that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I took the middle size. And I grabbed a red piece and a pink piece, and then I also add a pearl. So I did pink, pearl, red in the middle of each of my banner pieces. I apologize, my camera keeps moving. Someone had her little feet on the camera stand and I did not realize it until I saw the camera really move. So I'm sorry it's a little jerky. But I did want to mention, when you go to put the banner pieces on the string, you want to move backwards. So I did heart, E, V, O, L, heart. So you want to go ahead and move backwards. I think this little banner is so cute. It definitely came out better than I thought it would. And it's the perfect addition over my hot cocoa / coffee bar. Now that's not exactly done yet, but here's a little sneak peek. What do you think? For my last DIY, and if you're still with me, I want to say thank you so much. It was a long video, so I commend you. So for this last one, I started off with this canvas board from the Dollar Tree. I went ahead and took off the plastic, then using the same method I did before, I just ripped the canvas off by snipping a little bit here and there and pulling really hard. Again, I left those staples in there because they just really didn't bug me, but I made sure that it was cleaned off completely. After I got all the canvas off my board, I went ahead and took a baby wipe and dipped it into some of that antique wax and just rubbed it all around the frame. I went on the insides and the outsides as well. I didn't worry about the back though. This makes for a really great stain. Now, I made something like this on a Facebook Live that I did last week, and it got so many likes on Instagram, at least for me, that I thought I would kind of make something like it here now. So if you haven't done so already, please jump on Facebook and give my page, Crafts with Ash, DIY and Decor, a like and a follow, and then you can watch us do some live crafting on there as well. We have a lot of fun, we have a great crafting community, and I even have a Crafts with Ash group that you can post all of your creations on. I love seeing what everybody makes. Once my frame was all stained, I took these jumbo craft sticks that I got from Walmart and I lined them up on the, well, I used the front, but really you want to line them up on the back. That's where you're going to glue it, but I guess for this it doesn't matter. But you just want to line them up just to figure out how many you're going to need. Now I ended up using 8 here. So once they were all lined up, I took a marker and I just kind of marked where I would need to cut them down to fit my board. Obviously I want to get rid of the curved part, so I cut one down and then I put it back on to make sure that that was a good size, and then I used that to cut all of the other pieces down. Once all of my pieces were cut down to size, I took my Waverly chalk paint in ivory and I lightly brushed that all over each of my sticks. Now I was not going for full coverage here because this piece is going to be really rustic, and so I really wanted that natural wood to come through. So I just used my foam brush and just lightly brushed over each one of those sticks. Next, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and a makeup sponge, and I dipped my sponge into the lid and then dabbed it off on the paper, and then lightly brushed over each of the sticks with the wax. Now again, I'm going for rustic and I'm distressing these, so I'm just really paying attention to the edges and the corners. That way it brings out that antique look. After that, I took my sanding sponge and just sanded each one of the sticks down. This is your friendly reminder that if you're loving what you see so far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Not only does it help my channel grow, but it tells YouTube you love what you see and hey, you want to see more. So hit that like button. Then I took that sanding sponge and I also sanded the frame down as well. Now I actually used a brand new sponge on this. That way it was fine and it really sanded it a lot. That way the natural wood came through. After that, I flipped over my frame and I lined up all of my wood sticks to the back. Now, the first ones went all the way to the end, so you want to make sure to line these up before you hot glue them, because when I made it last week, I of course had one that hung over just a little bit, so I made sure to be extra careful this time. Once you have them all lined up and fit on that frame, you're going to start hot gluing them down. Now the best way I found to do this was to hot glue the first one down first, then take the next two off, put a strand of hot glue on each, the top and the bottom, and then put the sticks back down and then just keep going. But please pay attention to the other end to make sure that it hasn't scooted over or it's not hanging off the side. Once all of my pieces were glued down, I flipped it over and I had this awesome rustic frame. And it looked like shiplap in the back, and I love that look. Next, I took this greeting card, or a Valentine's Day card, that I got from the Dollar Tree, and it looks like a love banner, and I just kind of took it apart. It was really easy. I just slipped the string out of the open of it, the inside of it, and then I just took the banner off. Then this next part, I just kind of played a little bit with it. I just wanted to decide where exactly to put it. Once I decided where I wanted it to go, I took the strings and I wanted it to look like it was coming from the corners. So I just put a little hot glue in each of the corners and then pushed the string in to make it stick. Now, I also used a craft stick to help me do this. But then I remembered that I finally found one of those makeup, I don't know, rubber pushy things. I think it's like a face mask applicator or something. I don't really know, but I remembered that I had it, so I grabbed it so that way I could finally use it on this project. I was looking at every Dollar Tree for that, and I finally came across one, so I was excited to use it. To complete this sign, I took these foam heart stickers that I got from the Dollar Tree and just kind of randomly put them in different spots, switching up the colors. Now, I didn't have to hot glue these down. These were very sticky, so that worked on its own. But I think that this added just a really cute touch. I feel like this is a good combination between rustic meets cute Valentines with the bright colors but yet the dull background. I don't know, this is just my favorite look for this holiday, and this is probably one of my favorite pieces in this video. What do you think? For this first DIY, I used this heart from the Dollar Tree that has this metal word, love, on it, and a piece of scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby for 25 cents. The first thing I did was take off that love metal plaque with my scraper. It did take a little bit of muscle, but it just popped right off after I got it started. Then I cut off the hanger and traced my heart onto the scrapbook paper. Now, it did help to put the heart at an angle, that way the whole thing fit. After I traced it, I went ahead and cut it out. After my heart was cut out, I took some Mod Podge and I gave my heart a nice thin layer of that. Then I went ahead and put the paper right on top. Now, I did make sure to pay attention to the edges on my heart to make sure that it didn't flop up. Next, I took my sanding block that I got from the Dollar Tree and I sanded all the edges down to give it a nice clean cut wherever the paper was hanging over. Now, for this, I wanted to make sure to sand in the down direction. That way, it gets a nice clean edge. Then I took my Mod Podge again and just reinforced all the edges. that, I decided that I wanted my edges to be black, so I took a makeup sponge with black acrylic paint and just painted over the edges. Next, I took that metal word that came off of the front of the sign and I gave it a nice coat of white Waverly chalk paint. Actually, I believe I gave it 2 coats. After my word was dry, I took that makeup sponge again that had the black acrylic paint and I just carefully rubbed it all around the word. I very lightly, with barely any pressure or any paint on the sponge, just gave it a nice little brushing. Next, I took this roll of burlap ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree and I measured it to go across my heart. Now, I did measure it at an angle, so it was kind of diagonal just a little bit. Now, I cut off the edges of the ribbon to give it a frayed edge, and to make it look even more frayed, I went ahead and pulled off the string on each of the edges. Then, by using hot glue, I went ahead and hot glued the burlap down to my heart. Now, you want to very carefully do this, so I used a craft stick to push it down because obviously you could get burnt doing this, so just be really careful. Then I took my word and hot glued that on top of the burlap. Next, I flipped the heart over, and by using some twine, I made a hanger for my sign. I just cut off a piece of twine and hot glued the ends down right in the middle of my heart. Then I went ahead and cut off a little bit of that brown paper that I'm working on and put it over the ends of the twine just to reinforce it a little bit. To make my sign complete, I decided it needed a bow. So I took an assortment of different burlap ribbons that I got from the Dollar Tree and I cut 2 pieces off of each ribbon. Now, I wasn't really measuring here, I just cut different lengths so that way I could form an X, and I'm just going to make a messy bow. Now, for the straight burlap ribbon, I did go ahead and cut the edges off again and pull the strings out to make that fraying effect. Once I got all my ribbons cut out, I arranged them in a fat X. I didn't really have a pattern here, I just wanted to make sure that 2 of the same fabrics didn't land on top of each other. Then I took a small piece of twine and tied it together in the middle. Now you want to make sure to tie it really, really tight. After that, I fluffed out and kind of arranged all the ribbons how I liked it, and then gave them all dovetails. After completing my bow, I did realize that it was a little long, so I went ahead and trimmed it up just a little bit. Now, I'm not really a bow maker, so this did take a little bit of practice for me to get down, and I still don't think that I make the best bows, but I do try my hardest. So whenever I do make bows, this is kind of my go-to because it is the easiest one to make. You just have to arrange it in your hand, kind of how you like it. It's kind of just all trial and error, but then you get it down. After I felt like my bow was finally complete, I took a small piece of twine and just tied it in a shoelace bow. Then I went ahead and hot glued that on top of the other bow. I think this sign is the perfect farmhouse Valentine DIY, and with that little touch of red in there, it gives it a little bit of fun too. So, what do you think? This next DIY is so easy to make, and it only cost $1. So I picked up this XOXO sign from the Dollar Tree, and the first thing I did was cut off the tag on the back. Then I took some duct tape, or you can use painter's tape, and I duct taped off so only the bottom of the XOXO was showing. Now the top of the X is showing, but I'm only paying attention to the bottom of those letters. Then, by using Waverly chalk paint in white, I went ahead and painted the bottom of the XOXO. After my paint was all dry, I went ahead and peeled off the tape. And that was it. That completed my DIY. What do you think? In the next DIY, I started off by using one of these box signs from the Dollar Tree. Now this had a 3D flower on it, so I went ahead and popped that off by using my scraper. Then I flipped it over and got the majority of the tag off. I didn't really worry about getting the whole thing off, but I did want to get a good chunk of it off. And to do this, I used my hairdryer and my little scraper. After that, I took some black acrylic paint and painted the entire sign with that. Now I made sure to go around all the edges, the insides, but I didn't really worry about the back. That I just left how it was. But I did give this 2 coats of black acrylic paint. After my sign was completely dry, I took this really pretty handwriting scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby and I put it on the inside of this sign and kind of made an indent with my fingernail, and then I went in with a craft stick. Then I went ahead and cut it out as close to the indents as possible. Now if you notice the inside of that, you can tell I had to do this twice. So I ripped off the first time. This is my second attempt doing this, but after I cut out my little square, I kept measuring it to the inside and just making cuts where necessary until it was a perfect fit. Once I got my paper all cut down, I took some Mod Podge and gave the bottom of my sign a coat of that. Then I took my paper and pressed it right on top. Now you can see I got a little black paint at the bottom, but that's okay. I guess it just made it more of a farmhousey look. Then I took my Mod Podge and went over the edges and the corners to make sure that that paper was completely pressed down. Next, I took one of these hearts from the Make Your Own ornament set, and I think it came in a pack of 8 actually, and I painted one of them with black acrylic paint. Then I took 2 of the tumbling tower blocks and painted each of those with black paint as well. Next, to give my heart a distressed look, I took my sanding block and really sanded down the edges to bring up the natural wood. Then I did the same thing on the outsides of my sign as well. Next, by using my white chalk marker that I actually got from the Dollar Tree, I wrote P.S. I love you on that black heart. Then I took one of the tumbling tower blocks and I made sure it was the one where I had painted black over the top of it, and I hot glued it underneath my heart to hide the hole. Then I went ahead and hot glued the other one at the bottom of the heart, then hot glued the whole thing in the middle of my sign. Next, I took my chalk marker again and I just kind of lightly brushed around the edges of the sign itself and the heart. I think this little sign is so romantic, and it was so easy to make, but it has such a special meaning for the loved one in your life. What do you think? For my next DIY, I took a package of craft sticks that I got from the Dollar Tree and one of these little grapevine heart wreaths that I also got in a pack from the Dollar Tree. We're going to make a little stand-up sign. So the first thing I did was take 2 of the craft sticks and cut them down to make an L. Now I did make sure to cut off the rounded edges, and then I just kind of measured it down. I have no idea what these measurements are, but I really just eyeballed the whole thing. So I made my L. And then I took the grapevine heart and kind of put it in an angle, and that is going to act as my O. Then I took another one of those craft sticks, cut off the rounded edges, and lined it up with the longer part, the vertical part of my L, to make sure that at least those match. Then I cut off 2 of those to make a V. Then I took 4 more craft sticks and I made an E by using the same method. So I made sure that the vertical parts of the L, the V, and the longer up and down part of the E were all the same size. Then I just eyeballed the other parts of the E just to see what it looked like and how I liked it. Once I got all my sticks cut down, I took my Waverly chalk paint in Ivory and I lightly brushed over all the wood with that. Now, I wasn't going for full coverage here because I wanted it to look a little distressed, so I just lightly brushed over it. You can see that I'm actually holding the pieces down with another piece of that craft stick. I really love this method because then I'm not getting paint all over my fingers. So you might want to try that out. After my sticks were dry, I took my sanding block and I sanded down the edges of all the sticks and in the middle to bring up that natural wood. Next, I took some Waverly Antique Wax and a makeup sponge, and I dipped my sponge into the lid of the wax, and I dipped, dabbed, and then brushed it over. So I actually took a lot of my paint off by dabbing it on that paper, as you saw, and then that way it's not full coverage, but it's just enough to give it that distressed or antiqued look. Then to blend it all in, I went over it one more time with my sanding block. Next, it was time to arrange all my letters. So I took all of the pieces and lined them up how I liked them. Of course, I spelled out L, heart, V-E. Now, I did make sure that some of the pieces overlapped, so that's why you're going to see some of them touching, but I figured if I hot glued it that way, it would give it more of a hold. It would have something to hold on to. The only thing I wish I did do different was at the bottom of the V, I wish I would have cut them off at an angle so they fit together better, but it still looked really cute how it was. I kind of decided that the E's, the top and the bottom sticks of the E, was a little too long, so I went ahead and trimmed them down. After I had all my letters arranged how I liked it, I went ahead and hot glued it all down. Now, I did not glue all the letters together. I only hot glued the letter piece together, if that makes sense. So I put the L together, I put the V together, and I put the E together, but I did not hot glue them all together yet. After that, it was time to make a base for my letters. So I laid my letters out how I liked it, so I knew exactly how long to make my base. Then I took some tumbling tower blocks and I lined them all up. I ended up hot gluing 5 tumbling tower blocks together end to end, and I did 2 of those. Now you are going to see me hot glue the 2 strands, I guess, or the 2 bunches together. Do not do this. Keep them as 2 separate lengths, or I don't know what you want to call them, but leave them separate. Do not glue the 2 strands together. Again, do not glue those 2 together. Keep them separate. All right, so next I took my Waverly chalk paint in white and I painted both of my strands. Again, do this separately, do both of them separately, and I painted both of them. When I painted these, I made sure to get all edges and sides. Now, when you paint them separate, you're going to want to do the same thing. Make sure the whole thing is covered. After my blocks were dry, I went ahead and took my sanding sponge and I lightly sanded over the stand just to give it a little bit of distressing. Then I took that makeup sponge with the Waverly Antique Wax and I went ahead and brushed over the sides just a little bit, again, just to add that distressed look. Okay, so here you see I actually tore the 2 apart. Now you can see there's unfinished wood on the one side or on the insides of them. Definitely paint that white because you can kind of tell if you don't. The next thing I did was I took my letters and I hot glued them down to the back of my stand on one of the strands. Now you want to make sure to put the hot glue at the very tippy top of the bottom of the letter. I hope that makes sense. That way you can see the majority of the letter. So I'm only hot gluing at the top of the back of each strand. Then after that, and I have all my letters on, I went ahead and hot glued the back of the stand to the back of my letters. After that second piece was glued on, I went ahead and I hot glued that grapevine heart to the stand as well. Now, of course, it's only touching certain parts of my stand, so I only applied hot glue to those parts that it was touching. Finally, I took my little knife and I just kind of cleaned up some of the hot glue that spilled over. I think this sign is so cute, and it definitely channels a little bit of the farmhouse rustic vibe too. What do you think? For my last DIY, I picked up this kitchen towel that I got at the Dollar Tree, and it says, "Love builds a happy home." I thought this was so farmhouse and a little rustic too. The first thing I did was cut off the tag that was on top, and then I opened the towel, kind of patted it down to make it a little flatter, cut off the tag that was inside, and then flipped it inside out, so the actual print is on the inside. Then I just took my hot glue and I hot glued the sides down to each other, but I left the top open. Now you could definitely use fabric hot glue on this, and they do sell that at Hobby Lobby and I'm sure other craft stores too. And you always have the option to sew, but I don't know how to sew and I didn't have any of that fabric glue, so hot glue worked just fine. After I had the sides glued down, I went ahead and turned it right side out, I guess, and I made sure to push out the corners at my towel as well. Next, I grabbed this old pillow that we had laying around and I cut off a little piece of it. I'm going to use the stuffing, so I just took chunks and chunks of the stuffing and I just started stuffing my pillow. In hindsight, I probably could have put more stuffing in it. It was a little lumpy when I was done, but I think it still turned out really cute. Once I had enough stuffing in my pillow, I went ahead and to close this off, I just used hot glue. I tucked the outer edges in and then hot glued the outer edges together. Now here's a fun tip, and one hot glue gun burn later. I realized it was easier to go ahead and hot glue the edges down first before you try to hot glue the edges down together. This did cause me to get a little boo-boo on my hand, so then I realized it was a lot easier. So I would definitely hot glue down the edge to each other first and then hot glue the edges together. You definitely also want to pay attention to the corners. You want to make sure that that's all tucked in as well. After my edges were all glued down, I went ahead and kind of beat my pillow to make sure that all the stuffing was evenly placed. This pillow is the perfect little accent pillow to any Farmhouse Valentine home decor, and it essentially only cost me $1 to make. What do you think? And there we have it, 14 Valentine's Day DIYs that you can create for this season of love. You're gonna have to let me know down in the comments what you thought of all these DIYs and which one was your favorite. If you stayed throughout this whole video, drop a heart emoji or comment with the word heart down in the comments because I'm just interested to see who stuck with me through all of those. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and hey, share it with your friends. All right, well, until I see you again, I'll craft with you soon. Bye!